Hi, my name's Natalie, and welcome back to Rhetoric 101. Today, we're going to talk about the last of Aristotle's three rhetorical appeals, logos, which is the appeal to logic and reason. First, let's do a recap of what we've been through so far. In episode 1, we introduced rhetoric as the art of persuasion and talked about arguing as a productive disagreement. In episode 2, we explored ethos or credibility and why trust is the foundation of persuasion. And lastly, in episode 3, we discussed pathos, the emotional appeal, and how emotion drives action. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on logos, how reasoning, structure, and evidence shape persuasive arguments. So to start, what is logos? Logos refers to logical reasoning and the structure of an argument. Like ethos and pathos, it comes from Aristotle's framework of rhetorical appeals. Now, at first glance, logos might seem simple, just use facts and be right. But it's much deeper than that. As Heinrichs explains, logos is about proof, not just facts. It's not enough to have good information. You have to present it in a way that makes sense to your audience. In other words, logic is not just about being right, it's about making your argument work. There's a few key ways that logical arguments are structured. First is using deductive reasoning. This moves from a general principle to a specific conclusion. If the premise is true, the conclusion should logically follow up. An example of this is if all students must submit assignments on time and you are a student, then you must submit your assignment on time. The second one is inductive reasoning. This works in the opposite way, from specific examples to a general conclusion. This is very common in everyday arguments. For example, if you've had several positive experiences with a brand, you might conclude that the brand is reliable overall. And then finally, we have the enthymeme. These are arguments with an implied premise, something the audience fills in themselves. For example, she lives around here, so she must know the best places to eat. The unstated assumption is that locals are knowledgeable about their area. Enthymemes are especially powerful because they involve the audience in the reasoning process. Then, to use logos effectively, there are several key tools. First is a clear structure. Your argument should be organized and easy to follow. If people can't track your reasoning, even a strong argument will end up falling apart. Second is evidence and examples. Facts, statistics, and real-world examples help to support your claims and make them more convincing. Third is defining terms. The way you define key ideas can shape an entire argument. Controlling definitions helps guide how the audience understands the issue. And fourth is framing the argument. How you present the information matters. The facts can lead to different conclusions depending on how they're framed in that situation. Next, I want to take a second to talk about logical fallacies. Not all logical arguments are actually sound. Logical fallacies are errors in reasoning that weaken arguments, even if they seem convincing at first. Some common examples of these include hasty generalization, which is drawing a broad conclusion from very limited evidence. Then there's false cause, which is assuming that because one thing follows another, it caused it. There's the either or, which is the false dilemma, which is presenting only two options when really more exists. And lastly is ad hominem, attacking the person instead of addressing the argument. Recognizing these fallacies is important, not just for making better arguments, but for becoming a more critical listener. As Heinrich emphasizes, rhetoric is about both persuasion and awareness. Understanding flawed logic helps you to avoid being misled. And we did previously talk about this in the ethical considerations of rhetoric, and like I previously stated, it is just as much the responsibility of the audience to be able to point out things like logical fallacies when someone else is trying to persuade them. And next, just like with ethos and pathos, logo shows up in everyday situations more often than you would think. For example, if you're trying to debate with a professor about a grade, you might present evidence from the syllabus or maybe from some past assignments to help support your claim. Or in a group project discussion, you might use reasoning and examples to support your ideas. Even if you're comparing products before making a purchase, like whether you should get one face wash or another, you're using logos. You're evaluating features, prices, and reviews to make a logical decision. In all of these cases, logos helps to justify decisions and evaluate arguments more critically. And while logos is important, it doesn't work alone. Logos without ethos lacks trust. Even a strong argument won't persuade if the speaker isn't credible. Logos without pathos lacks motivation. People might understand your argument, but they won't really feel compelled to act on it. The most effective persuasion combines all three: ethos to build trust, pathos to motivate action, and logos to provide reasoning. Together, they create arguments that are believable, engaging, and convincing. So, to wrap up this episode, let's do a recap. Logos is the logical foundation of an argument. It includes reasoning, structure, and evidence, and it works best if it's combined with ethos and pathos. So as you move forward, pay attention to how logic is used, not just in what people say, but in how they say it, because understanding logos doesn't just make you a better speaker, it makes you a more thoughtful and critical thinker. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.